He's coming out very strong, and it's an extraordinary, and I would have thought unprecedented attack. It's not the first time he has come out in public.
No, and he had those ads last week of the chocolates that were claimed as part of expenses for one of the lawyers
which were really
in the Moriarty Tribunal.
The ads were O'Leary-esque, Michael O'Leary-esque in their style,
right,
talking about it, expensive and full of nuts, which perhaps wasn't O'Brien's usual style, but an extraordinary attack.
As I said, I mean, different papers have a different take on it. The way Liam Collins dealt with it in the Sunday Independent is just to a straightforward transcription of a question and answers interview. The Sunday Times, as I said there, their headline reads, O'Brien licence award illegal. Just on this again, Andrea, before I move on to my other guests. Obviously, Denis O'Brien has had a preliminary copy, although they're not going to come out with the full report until, 2011, 2012 or so. But he believes that they have made all these findings against him. Now, his claim is that Moriarty is under huge pressure. He believes that in the end the bill will be something like 200 million spent in this tribunal, and that Moriarty is under enormous pressure to come out with something strong. And the interpretation is Denis O'Brien believes that he's going to make the wrong call on this and declare that the award was actually given out illegally. But that would draw into question the behaviour of the civil servants, obviously, within the Department of Communications.
Well, this is, and indeed this week we saw the extraordinary spectre of Richard Nesbitt, who was legal advisor, a very senior counsel to the department at the time the licence was awarded, and to see a senior counsel put in the witness box to give his account of the advice he gave. It was an extraordinary move. It was prompted, no doubt, by the draft findings, which have clearly put the wind up a number of very senior civil servants. So, everybody who's the subject of Moriarty's preliminary tribunals is clearly very, very worried, which is leading to these unprecedented responses from the subjects of those.
John McGuinness, what do you make of this? I mean, a series of interviews, as I said, with Denis O'Brien coming out very robustly, defending his position, saying there was nothing untoward in the awarding of the licence. Moriarty's on a kind of a witch hunt against him.
Well, on one side you're seeing, the whole affair of the tribunal being acted out now in public, in a very public way, and in a way that's very direct and confrontational. On the other side you're seeing you're being given an insight into what these tribunals, what is going on in the tribunals. And I think people will be horrified that after 13 years, 200 million or 100 million, whichever report you believe, is costing the taxpayer an enormous amount of money. And again, in this country, you have a prolonged investigation, ongoing, costing a fortune, with no procurement rules used in the beginning to select the main players in this. With the Public Accounts Committee, one member saying it was the greatest gravy train we have seen in Irish history, and acres of media coverage on it. I think people will be horrified. And I was Vice Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee for 5 years, and I would say that after 13 years you would expect a final report, matters to be dealt with, and we move on. And instead now we're going to have this public enactment of the tribunal with the cost to the state going up every single day at a time when we can't afford it.
Yeah, and Denis O'Brien, in his interview with Liam Collins in the Sunday Independent, and as I said, it's one of many he's given to Sunday papers today, he said that there are 6 counsel from the Law Library employed down at the Moriarty Tribunal, and they get paid €1,850 a day, and that the senior counsel charged €2,500 a day. I mean, it is an extraordinary amount of money, and he says that although the tribunal, they're able to claim for many, many more days than they actually correlate to the sittings of the tribunals, because he said at the end of the day, if you take 2009, they did 15 days so far, in 2008 3 days, 2007 17 days, 2006 18 days, yet he says you have barristers working 308 days a year. I mean, Andrea Martin, you are in the legal profession. Although they wouldn't be sitting, would they be working away all the time earning their money for those fees?
What's happened here is the way that barristers' fees are structured is that they're particular fees for drafting particular court documents. Then when a case is going to court, there's what's called a brief fee is charged, and then each day, that's to get the case into court, and each day there's what's called a refresher fee, which is basically a daily fee for fighting a case in court in the High Court, and these would be equivalent to top rates in the High Court. What I think has happened here is that, as John has pointed out, this has gone on so much longer than anyone anticipated. Fees were set on the basis the tribunals function as quasi courts. Now, if we were to look at the way similar matters are investigated by state appointees in the UK, we see a much more inquisitorial approach where you don't have both sides cross-examining each other to the same extent. It's more like a magistrate. The magistrate investigates, takes witnesses. So what has happened here is that the day rates, which usually go on only for a short period of a few weeks in a court, are actually being charged over years and years. And if everybody could look at it again, I'm sure John's committee, if they'd looked at it again, would have said, lads, we should have structured this a completely different way.
Yes,
because
but
people are getting almost full-time jobs on special contractor day rates.
It's unbelievable. Joe Higgins, what do you make of both Denis O'Brien's defence and, of course, the massive amount of money that has been spent on this tribunal? And still here we're waiting, as John McGuinness says, 13 years on or whatever it is. It started, the licence itself was awarded in 1996, and we have no conclusion yet.
Yes, but let's separate the issues out, because they deserve to be discussed each in their own term and in their own space, because one can otherwise obscure the importance of the other. Now, just to deal with the lawyers, it is an outrage, of course, but the law library and the barristers have been a law unto themselves, and it was Fianna Fáil and the PDs who set these fees for the lawyers. And we remember one time Mr. McDowell, a former Justice Minister, made a hero of himself for a day, getting headlines in all the newspapers when he attacked the cost of the tribunals and the fees that the barristers were getting. And when we did a little bit of basic research, which the journalists who gave those headlines should have done, we found that 2 years before, Mr. McDowell was the one who had actually upped the rates and fixed the rates that they were getting on a daily basis.
But there was an attempt then by the previous government to reduce the rates, but of course the lawyers said, no, we're actually not going to take any reductions. The fees have been set, we must stick by the rules.
Well, the question is who is running the country, or who should run it. The point is that law for ordinary people on ordinary wages is just out of their reach. I was unfortunate enough to be the wrong end of this in a fairly run-of-the-mill injunction proceedings several years ago, and there was and got the costs thrown against me. There was a senior counsel against us who worked for 2.5 hours. His fee was 7,500. His junior, who uttered not a word but studied his senior's back for the 2.5 hours, got 5,000. Now, it gets worse. 2 days later, the same proceedings continued, but a shorter duration. The senior got another 7,500 and the junior another 5,000.
Was this over your refusal to pay the waste charges now?
Yes.
And you went to jail, of course, for that.
Yes, but that's not really the point I want
that,
highlight
yes.
now.
But did you have to pay all of those fees?
Yes. I and my colleague, Councillor Claire Daly, got hit jointly. So that was 25,000 just for these two lawyers for a few hours in court. Now, it's similarly what's been going on with the tribunals. And of course, there should be a new procedure by which these investigations can be carried out quickly. And of course, the lawyers' fees need to be completely restructured and changed, and an entirely different system put in place. Now, briefly, on to
Denis O'Brien, because
if I can just, O'Brien himself.
In terms of the Sunday Business Post, Joe, now, just to give people an idea of the different lines that are being taken and what he's stressing, he is saying that he believes the manner in which the tribunal is being run suggests to him that the tribunal, quotes, has an agenda. And there's a quote from him saying, they are looking for scalps to defend spending €200 million. And he says that Ireland's reputation would be severely damaged if the Moriarty Tribunal's final report concluded there was wrongdoing by civil servants in the granting of the licence.
Well, this clearly is a preemptive strike by Mr. O'Brien, but it's a very unlevel playing pitch, because we, the public, do not have sight of the report Mr. O'Brien has. And he's decided to get acres of coverage in today's newspapers, for example, by using the privileged information that he has, which we don't have.
Well, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that now.
Well, there is, because we
people
can't
will do
judge.
that.
No, we need the information. We need what evidence has been adduced and what conclusions have been drawn, so we can judge. The people can judge. We remember Mr. Ahern, former Taoiseach, went on a diatribe against the tribunal as well, at the same time when his credibility was just not holding up.